Hello everyone, welcome to the channel. My name is Cordumt and today we will be discussing Pathfinder Kingmaker. The objective of this video is I want to give a brief review of this game. I mostly want to share some thoughts about Pathfinder Kingmaker, what I think about the game, my own experiences with the game, my previous playthrough, stuff like that. And then we're also going to do also kind of a brief run report of the playthrough that we just finished for the channel, which was on Last Azlanti and Unfair. So if you didn't check that out, I will leave a link in the description and hopefully also on the top of the screen here in case you want to check out the playthrough. It was successful, I am happy for it, and let's get started, I guess. So the first thing I want to mention, and this is going to be part of the review, I guess, is the place of Pathfinder Kingmaker in the cRPG world. And, I mean, this is not a new game, right? This game has been around for a couple of years. And I think Owlcat Games, if you aren't aware, Owlcat is the company that, you know, that made these games. So it made Pathfinder Kingmaker, Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous, which is like the sequel. And then it also made Rogue Trader more recently. And I think all of their games are pretty good. They definitely have a lot of good stuff. They also have some problems, which we'll go into in a second. But for the most part, I think when we're talking about the games that belong to the cRPG universe, I think Pathfinder is a very easy game to bring up in a discussion. Right, so if anybody asks me about cRPGs, or if I think about cRPGs, the first three I'm going to think about are going to be Baldur's Gate, the originals, Pillars of Eternity, and Pathfinder. So, naturally I'm talking about Baldur's Gate 1 and 2, then I'm going to be talking about Pathfinder Kingmaker along with Wrath of the Righteous, and also Pillars of Eternity 1 and 2. But I'm just going to group them up into their own, you know, their own franchises, I guess. I think it is a very solid cRPG. Even though I find it to be a very good game, and it's a game that I've played a lot of, and I love this game, I definitely think it's not a game for everyone, as much as it kind of pains me a little bit to say that. I think it can be for everyone if you kind of ignore certain things and you dump the difficulty down to like story difficulty, but other than that, it's not going to be a game for everyone. I will say that I think it's a very well put together cRPG. It has a very good story. I think the world is very well done. I think that the way that the game progresses through the story is also well done. With various chapters, various enemies, the villains and bosses you go through the various chapters, all the way up to the end. I think it's a very well done cRPG. I think gameplay-wise, it's excellent. It's probably one of the strongest points. And even more importantly than any of that, in my opinion, I think the strongest point of this game is going to be the actual character building, both for your main character as well as for your companions. So, definitely a solid pick in the cRPG world. I think it's a very easy game to remember if anybody's talking about this style of games. And let's go into some more specific topics here. And the first topic I have is going to be about replayability, because I think it touches a lot of very important things about this game. And for that, let me just open up a new game here. I won't go into the... Well, I guess I can briefly mention the DLCs, but I'm mostly going to be focusing on the main story. We will touch difficulty later. I just want to go here to the character screen. So obviously, if we're talking about playing a cRPG, well, at least me, personally, I always create a new character from scratch. I always like to customize my own character. But you also have some pre-made characters as well. So you have a fighter, a paladin, a ranger, a sorcerer, and a cleric. The game also has an automatic level up for these characters, along with the companions that you can use, especially if you're a new player and you aren't familiar with character building. I will explain that in more detail in a second. But let's focus on the new character from scratch here. So, create your champion from scratch, choose their race, class, gender alignment, customize their appearance, and finally tune their abilities, skills, and feats. Just pick any portrait here, I guess a dwarf, because I like dwarfs. And let's begin looking at this. So, I also have a video where I made a guide for new players, because I think this game is very overwhelming for anybody that hasn't played this game before, or they haven't played Dungeons & Dragons 3rd edition, or the Pathfinder system as well. There is a lot to choose from. There's a lot of information that just shows up in your face and you don't know what's happening. So I made that guide and I explained a lot of the things we're going to be seeing here, so I won't be going into detail on those things. I'm just going to briefly go over what I'm talking about here in terms of replayability and character builds. So you have a bunch of races to pick from. Naturally, there's a lot of role-playing involved here, like if you like playing a dwarf, you can play a dwarf. If you want a gnome, you can play a gnome, a human, an elf, yada yada yada, right? But then, not only role-playing wise, every one of these races are going to have their own unique stuff. This isn't unique to cRPGs, of course, but it's just one additional layer of complexity that the characterization has on Pathfinder Kingmaker. So you can see right here, for example, the dwarf. You already have a bunch of traits here, which you will not find on other races, for example. So the human looks a lot simpler, right? A lot cleaner. The dwarf has a lot of this. The gnome has some different stuff as well. They're more focused into magic and illusion magic specifically. You can pick a gender. It doesn't matter gameplay-wise. I think maybe some dialogue options or romance options. I've never really played a female, so I can't really tell you how much it changes in terms of story or romances. But gameplay-wise, there's no change in stats or abilities for being male or female. I guess that's not entirely correct. There are some very specific abilities that will only affect male characters. It's kind of funny, now that I think of it. So there might be some metagaming involved in picking a female here. We also have our stats, which we can see a little bit further up. But this really is the main screen that I want to talk about when we're talking about character building and replayability. So you can pick your portrait, you can pick your race, and then you can pick your class. So for the class, we have a bunch of them. We have a lot of basic classes, coming all the way from Alchemist up to Wizard. And then we also have some prestige classes that you can only level up in if you have certain prerequisites done. So for example, the Stalwart Defender requires dodge, toughness, and a base attack bonus of 7. So already, if you see these, you can already start thinking about multi-classing, because you cannot pick these from the start. You have to actually level up in a different class before you can go into these classes. But let's pick one at random here. So if I take Alchemist, right from the get-go I can pick between Alchemist, Grenadier, Vivisectionist, or Chirurgeon. They all have the same base functionality, but they are all unique in their own subtypes. So the Alchemist does something well, the Grenadier specializes in throwing bombs, Vivisectionist has some sneak attacks and it's more melee focused, I guess. Well, not true, you can also be ranged, but it's more sneak attack based. And the Chirurgeon, I think he has some healing abilities, if I'm not mistaken. Yep. And if you look at other classes as well, like the Barbarian, you also have 4 picks. The Bard, 4 picks. The Cleric, same thing. Druid, Fighter. So you can quickly see that even though you have a lot of classes, you technically have 4 times that amount of classes, because they all have their own specific stuff within each class. This, in and of itself, is already something that can allow you to have great replayability in this game, because naturally, if you play with the main character, let's say an Alchemist, it's going to be a very different experience than if you've played a Fighter, right? Or a Kineticist, or a Sorcerer. There's just a lot of unique stuff that you can do with different classes. Not only that, but in this game, or in this Pathfinder system, and you can also think about Dungeons & Dragons, I think 3rd edition, that you can basically multi-class in any way you want. And why am I mentioning this and why is this important? Because if we take some other comparisons here, and I'm gonna pick between the other two franchises that I think are very important in the cRPG world, which is gonna be Baldur's Gate, the originals, as well as Pillars of Eternity. So if we're thinking about the classic Baldur's Gate, I've played those games to death. They are my favorite games of all time. I consider them to be the best cRPG ever made. And I find that they have a lot of replayability, like immense replayability. It still doesn't match the replayability of this game in terms of character customization. Why do I say this? Because if you are playing Baldur's Gate or Pillars of Eternity, what you do at the start is basically you pick a class, or at most you can pick a multi-class. That's the only thing you can do. So you can do like, I want to be a fighter. You can also pick like a kit of Berserker, for example. Or you can pick to be a fighter mage, for instance, or a fighter thief, something like that. Or, the final option, you can level up a main class, and then you can dual class into a second class later on in the game. But that's the most you can get out of multi-classing in the original Baldur's Gate. If you think about Pillars of Eternity, in the first game, you only have a single class. So if you pick a fighter, you're going to be a fighter the entire game. And in the second game, you can either pick a single class or you can pick a multi-class. But you pick it from the start. So you're either going to be a fighter cleric or a fighter thief. You can change it midway. In Pathfinder, though, what you can do is you can start the game with a level 1 fighter, but nothing is stopping you at level 2 from picking, for example, Bard, or a Cleric, or a Druid, or whatever you want to pick, you can pick. So you can end up having a build with 10 different classes. It's probably gonna suck, but you can do it, okay? And so there really is a tremendous amount of customization you can do for your characters. There's a lot of versatility involved in building them. And not only on the main character, but also on your companions you can do this. You can pick up a companion at level 1, and then you can level him up to something completely different at level 2. So in my playthrough, for instance, I pick up Valerie as a fighter at level 1, and at level 2, I make her a bard. And then I give her some more points in fighter, and then some more points in bard, and also some points in Dragon Disciple. So there's a lot you can pick between the different classes to make the character exactly as you want him to be. Now, this, I think, is one of the funnest aspects of the game. I think it's one of the major strong points in Pathfinder Kingmaker or Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous, is that you really have a lot you can pick when creating your character. There's a lot of fun in making your character. This is not to say that it's all advantages, right? One of the things that I felt when I started playing this game for the first time, and I've heard from a lot of friends and other people talking about the game, is that when you get to this screen, it's very easy to spend hours on hours just looking at every single thing there is and trying to understand what exactly you want to do. So we see a bunch of classes. Within every class we see, I'm gonna call them subclasses, I guess. And then for each of them, you can also see your class progression. And the class progression is gonna involve passive features like proficiencies. It's going to involve bonus combat feats. It's going to involve specific abilities from the class, other passive abilities. It's going to involve base attack bonus progression, saving throw progression. There's just a lot to take in at the start, and I can pretty much guarantee that anybody that's not familiar with this system or hasn't played the game before is going to have trouble understanding exactly how the character works, how things are happening behind the scenes, and especially how to build a character exactly the way they want. More likely than not, you're gonna have some trouble making your own character by yourself, especially if you try to multi-class. Because You may have weird interactions between different classes. Your feats might not work the way you think they do. Feats also have prerequisites that you might not be aware of. So that is the major downside of having such a cool and complex system for building your characters. So it's one of the best things about the game, and at the same time, one of the more overwhelming and possibly negative things for some players about the game. Now, naturally, and as I said on my new player guide, my suggestion would be, if you are trying out the game for the first time, you have one or two options. Either pick a pre-made character and just load a pre-made build, or if you want to make your own, then just make sure that you stick to a pure class, at least for the first time you're playing. So if you want to play a fighter, go to just put all your levels into fighter. Don't start mixing them up, because you will probably make a worse character if you start multi-classing without being too aware of what's happening than if you just kept the class pure. Just keeping that in mind. Regardless, so there's pros, there are cons, but replayability-wise, I think this is one of the strongest points about the game, and for me, there's a lot of fun in terms of building a character and seeing how it progresses throughout the game. Something I also had here as a note is I want to talk a little bit about build guides. Because one thing that can happen is, you may want to play the game, you feel that a pre-made build is a little bit too easy for you, or you don't want a pre-made build, you want something a little bit more customized, but you don't want to go through the trouble of understanding all of these little squares, which they can be very daunting if you look at this. So what a lot of people do is, instead of trying to figure this out one by one, which is difficult, you can just go to the internet and look for specific build guides. So you can go and see, okay, so give me a kinetic knight build. And you're gonna find a lot of that online. You're gonna find YouTube videos, you're gonna find forums, you're gonna find a lot of stuff, and everybody's gonna have their own take on their builds. There surely are going to be good builds online, and there will also be awful builds online. But I'm not focusing on good versus bad here. What I want to mention is, most of the guides that I've also seen online, be they good or bad, the major flaw that I see is that they are not properly explained. Okay? They're not properly explained. So you may see a build, and you're gonna see, like, at level 1, take this class, at level 2, take that class, at level 3, take feat X, at level 5, take feat Y, but they won't tell you exactly why you want to take this feat. Or more importantly, why are you taking this feat? How do you use it? In which circumstances is this useful? Against what enemies? In what party composition? Do I need synergies for this, or does it work as a standalone? There's a lot to take into account when building a character, and if you just look at a spreadsheet saying, level 1 pick this, level 3 pick that, you're probably not going to understand what's happening. And I guess I can show an example here. I might come back here over here in a second, but... let's see where I actually continue the game from where I finished it after killing the last boss. I think the game auto-saves before fighting the final boss. Yeah, okay, so no spoilers here. I won't even show the map. I'm just showing the characters. You can ignore all of these composite longbows. So one thing I want to show here is... let's take, for example, Rigongar here. Maybe it's easier on her, on Valerie. So this is something that you will see very commonly on martial character builds. And by martial character, I mean someone that you want to equip typically with armor and weapons, and you want to send them into melee, or using a ranged weapon, but fighting through physical means, right? You're using weapons to fight, you're not casting spells. Something that's very often seen in builds is you will find weapon focus feat, you will find dazzling display feat, and you will also find Shatter Defenses feat. Now, these are very powerful feats. I'm using them, I like them, I think they're strong. But you have to know how they work. So, first of all, if you look at weapon focus, you need to pick a specific weapon for this. If you haven't played the game before, more likely than not, you will not know what weapons the game has. You will not really know what you want to be using. Do you want to use a bastard sword? Do you want to use a scimitar? Why are they different? One has increased critical range over the other. Do I even know what critical range means? There's a lot to know. And you come into a point in a build guide and you see weapon focus, let's say on bastard sword. And let's for one moment imagine that you don't like playing with bastard swords. You want your character to use axes. So what do? Do you follow the guide blindly and pick bastard sword? Or do you pick axes because you like axes? But what if you pick an axe right now that seems good, but then you never find another axe again throughout the course of the game that's actually useful? Weapon focus, I think, is one of the toughest choices to make in this game, if you haven't played it before, because you don't really know what you want to be using, what are the good weapons and what are the bad weapons. So that, in and of itself, can be a little bit complicated. But sure, let's say you're focusing on bastard swords, she starts with a bastard sword, so you put weapon focus on bastard sword. Okay, fair enough. Then you find Dazzling Display. While wielding the weapon in which you have weapon focus, you can perform a bewildering show of prowess as a full round action. Make a persuasion intimidate check to demoralize all foes within 30 feet who can see your display. And this is part of a lot of build guides, even if the character we're talking about has 0 points in persuasion, right? And what I've heard people saying and asking me is, why do I want Dazzling Display? Because what they do is they follow the guide, they pick Dazzling Display, let's say at level 11, and they think, okay, I got a new feat, it's in the guide, so it's probably powerful, and what they do is they take their character, they charge the enemy, and then they click the button Dazzling Display. And then they wonder, why isn't my character doing anything special? Because you're not meant to be using Dazzling Display on every character. This has a purpose. On some characters, like if you have a character with very high persuasion, especially if you have intimidation bonuses from items or feats or something like that, you can, out of the melee, use this because you are going to shake your opponents. That's the purpose of this. But this is not something you want to do on every single person, right? So I can have Dazzling Display on Valerie and also on Rigongar. I don't want both of them in melee just casting this over and over and over. That's not the point. So in a lot of guides, this is there, but you don't actually use it, okay? This might just be there as a prerequisite for Shatter Defenses, because this requires Dazzling Display. And then, again, we can look at this. Your skill with your chosen weapon leaves opponents unable to defend themselves if you strike them when their defenses are already compromised. So, any shaken, frightened, or panicked opponent hit by you this round is flat-footed your attacks until the end of your next turn. And I also see people take this blindly. So again, following the guide, so they take Weapon Focus, Dazzling Display, Shatter Defenses, and then they don't actually have anybody in the party capable of applying Shaken, or Frightened, or Panicked. So you basically just wasted potentially 3 feats by following a guide blindly that won't do anything for you. Okay, so this is just a very specific example, and it's one that's come up multiple times with people talking to me. So I'm bringing this one up as an example. There are other examples of feats that might only make sense if you actually have the party for it. I actually have another example here. So Seize the Moment. You might think this feat is very good, but you need to have allies that also have it. So teamwork feats especially, if you just follow a guide and pick them, but your other allies don't have them, you essentially just wasted the feat for no reason. Okay, so I'm just saying, One of the strongest points in the game is character building. Look into it, study it if it's something you like. Look up guides if you want, but don't follow them blindly. Even if you look at what I'm showing here, and I'm gonna make a separate video explaining how I build my characters and whatnot, don't follow it blindly, okay? I will explain exactly why I have the things I have and how they work with my party, but some of these might make sense for my particular party, they might not make sense for your party. Another example, if you look at my spellbook on my sorcerer, you're gonna find animal growth on level 5. If you just copy this blindly, and you don't actually have a pet in your party, then you just wasted the spell slot, right? So just be careful when following build guides, YouTube videos, all that stuff, even mine. Just make sure you understand what you're doing. Next topic. I want to talk a little bit about difficulty. So let's open our options menu here and look into difficulty. So the game has a bunch of different difficulties, right? You have custom, where you can basically do whatever you want. You can customize all these things, so critical hits, you might even turn them off, so you never take critical hits. You can make them weaker, you can make them normal. You have other stuff like Death's Door, dead companions rise after combat. If you don't like, for example, if one of your companions gets killed, it might frustrate you having to like have a scroll of resurrection, or having to have reagents to cast a spell of resurrection, stuff like that. So you can even just turn this on, and if people die, they will just get back up after combat. Okay? Negative effects also. For example, if you are blinded, if you have ability damage where somebody drains your strength, anything like that, you can also just turn off if you don't like it. So you can customize pretty much everything to your taste. Okay? So custom is quite cool in case you want to go for that. And then you have from easier to hardest, you go from story up to unfair. Why am I making difficulty its own topic? Also something I discuss in more detail in the beginner's guide. This game can be frustratingly difficult, infuriating at times, okay? There's a lot of difficulty to this game that is not obvious when you start playing. There are certain enemies, certain areas, certain encounters. They will have very specific things happen, and if you are not properly prepared for them, you will get murdered. And even if you don't get murdered, you might actually win the fight, but then all of a sudden you look at your characters and you see that your tank has been drained of 5 levels, your archer was drained of 6 points of dexterity, you have a poison ticking on somebody. It can be very hard to recover from certain fights. You might have to go back to town, you might have to rest a bunch of times, you may have to spend gold on scrolls. There's a lot to say here. Some enemies are basic. If we're talking about like a human bandit, they do what they would expect you to do. But if you're thinking about like fighting a swarm type of enemy, the first time you will meet a swarm in this game, I guarantee you're not gonna have a good time. If you meet the late game swarms, even less of a good time. If you meet Fae, which cast a lot of enchantment spells, you're not gonna have a good time. And there's just a lot that can go very wrong for you. Not only that, but the game is based on dice rolls. So, like Dungeons and Dragons, Pathfinder is based on a D20 system. You roll dice to determine if you are going to hit your enemies or if you are going to get hit yourself, right? So there is randomness associated to this. And if you try to go up in difficulty, what's going to happen is your enemies are going to be tougher. They will have more HP. They will have more stats. They will hit you more accurately. They will also hit you harder. If you play on unfair, you take double damage. Okay, so there's a lot of things here that happen. You might even come to a point in difficulty where you cannot even retrain a character. So if you make a mistake leveling up your character, that mistake is final. So you either load the game to a point previous of when you made the mistake, or you have to live with the mistake. If you play on easier difficulties though, it's not that much of a problem. You can retrain your characters. Your enemies will not deal double damage to you. They won't hit you that hard or that accurately. But I will say that for a new player, even normal difficulty in Pathfinder Kingmaker and Wrath of the Righteous is a very punishing experience. Like, really. I am someone that when I pick up a new game, the first thing I do is set the difficulty to the maximum difficulty, because I want to have the maximum challenge and I want the game to last as long as possible. And I'm not saying that I'm like the god tier player. I'm not, okay? I'm a regular player with experience at this point. I tried unfair. There are no words for what I felt about the game at that point. But they were all negative. And a lot of cursing involved as well. One thing I can guarantee, if you haven't played this game before, and feel free to test it if you doubt me. If you pick unfair at the start, you will not be able to get through the tutorial. The tutorial might actually be one of the hardest areas in the game if you start on unfair. It's no joke. So, if you are playing the game for the first times, don't be afraid of going down in difficulty. A lot of players are trying out Pathfinder now because they played Baldur's Gate 3, which is a very big hit, and now they want to try out other cRPGs, popular ones. And as an example, if you've played Baldur's Gate 3, I would say that Tactician difficulty on Baldur's Gate 3 is probably easier than normal on Pathfinder Kingmaker. Okay? I don't have like accurate math for this or statistics, but from the feel of it, I would say that's an accurate description on my account at least. Tactician difficulty on Baldur's Gate 3 is probably simpler than normal in Pathfinder Kingmaker. Especially while you are learning the game, learning the builds, the feats and the enemies and what they can do. It's very important to not start out at the maximum, because if you do, you are going to find the game very frustrating, it's going to be a very negative experience, and you might think that the game sucks, when in fact, you are just playing on something that even the game is telling you on the left side here is not recommended for players not familiar with this system. And those who are not willing to suffer. The enemies will not forgive any mistakes made during combats, and your character builds must be no less than perfect. So also a very good point. I talked about replayability and customization of characters. I will say that probably a lot of different builds are not viable if you start moving up in difficulty. You will not be able to go through the enemies. And I don't mean this in like a skill sense. It's not like you are bad at controlling your characters. That's not the point. We're not playing Counter-Strike here or anything like that. It's just that being a game based on dice and mathematical values, if you have to roll a d20 dice in order to determine if you're gonna hit an enemy or not, but the armor class of that enemy is, let's say, 50, you have to... If you don't roll a 20, which is a guaranteed hit, you will never hit that enemy. So you have to learn the game and learn to build your characters to stack up as many bonuses as you can, because basically you roll the D20 die and then you add bonuses on top in order to try and hit those enemies. So if you don't know what you're doing, if you don't have the proper party, the proper builds and whatnot, you will literally not be able to hit the enemies. It's actually impossible unless you roll critical hits back to back, which won't happen. Okay, so again, just stating that difficulty is important for this game. Make sure you don't pick something you are not prepared for, because otherwise the experience will be quite bad. Now, talking about companions. So in this case, I have a couple of companions here. I always play with the full party. In any cRPG that I play, I love playing with the full party. I know some people like playing the game solo, or you might only enjoy having like 4 people in the party. It's doable, it's perfectly viable. It's just not my thing. I prefer having a full party because I enjoy having party synergies. Like, my character is very good at doing a certain thing, but he might not be too good, for example, at tanking the enemies or being in melee, so I have someone who is actually good at that job. Or I might be very good at dealing damage, but I might not be too good at healing, so I like having a cleric in my party to buff my friends. I might want to have someone who is specialized in debuffing, someone who is specialized in using ranged weapons. So I think there's a lot of fun in making a party that works well together, and they complement themselves and they synergize with each other. I think that's my preferred experience, at least. And the companions in Pathfinder Kingmaker, I think, are quite solid. I think they are fun companions. I think they all have an interesting story and personality. Some of them I might not like too much, that's just my personal preference. There are others that I might find are not very suitable to tackle the higher difficulties. But for the most part, if you want to experience, you know, having people in your party that will interact with each other, interact with you, give you companion quests, stuff like that, you definitely have quite a bit to choose from in Pathfinder Kingmaker. I think they're all interesting, they're all unique, they all bring something unique to the table. They're all very good at their different jobs. Again, you can customize them however you want. So again, as a quick example, Valerie, it's one of the first ones you can pick up in the game. She starts as a tower shield specialist, okay, which is basically a fighter specialization. And you know, I wanted her to play the role of a fighter, but I also wanted to have getting us some support for the party. So I leveled up in Bard. And then I also wanted some more martial prowess and some defenses, so I also went for Dragon Disciple. So not only can you customize your main character, you can also customize your companions in any way you see fit. So I think they are very capable of helping you out, with a few exceptions. I think they're all interesting. They all have a bunch of companion quests, which will play a role at the end of the game. They're all fun, in my opinion. I think I've played with at least once with every single one of them. I guess the one I like the least is probably Tristian. It feels very uninteresting for me, but it's still a cool character, I guess. It won't be the same variety of companions that you have, for example, in Baldur's Gate, the originals. But then again, I don't think there's any other cRPG that has that much variety. So I guess those are the exception, you know, a positive exception in that sense. Here, you won't have that many companions, but the ones you do have, I think, are well built, well done, and they will serve you well. You can also play the game with a party full of mercenaries, by the way. So in this case, I'm playing with the main character, and I'm also playing with the mercenary. So Cordampina here is not an in-game companion, she's not an NPC. So I basically purchased, quote-unquote, or rented a mercenary to come with me in my adventures, and I just built her the way I wanted. Which you can also do. You can have one mercenary, you can have 5 mercenaries, you can do whatever you want. So companions, I think, are a strong point of this game as well, and they are fun to play with. The next topic I have is going to be about story, the lore, and the world. I think that this game has a lot going for it in terms of story, lore, and world. Personally, out of the 2 Pathfinder games, this one and Wrath of the Righteous, I think this one did a better job at building the story and the game world. I think it's a little bit more interesting. I think even the areas are more interesting and prettier, if you can count that as a argument. Personally, I do. One thing I find in Wrath of the Righteous is that the areas are very dark. They're all very very brown. They don't feel very alive. And in Pathfinder Kingmaker you have much brighter areas, much prettier areas. So to me at least, that's a bonus for this game. I think the story is well done. I think it's an interesting story. Actually a very interesting story indeed. It's very unique. I've never played a game that had the same feel for the story that this one did. There's a lot of ups and downs, there's a lot of plot twists. You meet a lot of people, both friends and foes. You have different bosses throughout the game, throughout the chapters. I think they all tie up quite well, and I think it's a very good experience from start to finish. There are definitely also some areas that personally I love. Like early in the game you have the old sycamore. You are playing in caves under a big tree. The inhabitants are going to be kobolds and mites. They're all very cute. I think I think it's a very fun area. Then you also have the troll chapter, which you also have a bunch of dungeons that are very cool. I just think basically that the level design, the area design is very well done. It's very interesting, and the combat encounters are also very well done. So all positives in my opinion regarding story, lore, and the world. I also had a topic here for the different chapters and bosses, but I think I kind of covered it. I like the fact that the game is split. Well, it's clearly split between multiple chapters. In each chapter you basically have a main villain. You always have an objective to go for. So I like that. I never thought that any of the villains were uninteresting. I think all of them are well done. I think all of them are challenging and interesting. So that's a very good thing. There are some games where the villain is not very interesting or it's not enjoyable. But in this one I think I like them all. Other topic is gonna be, well, I had areas and levels. Basically what I said, right? There are certain areas or dungeons that I love. Very well done, very cool design. There are also some others which I don't like as much, but that's gonna happen, you know, basically in every game. You have some preferences, some you like, some you don't, but overall, a very good experience. Then, I also have here something about enemy types. So, this is, I guess, a section dedicated to the enemies you find in this game. Something I don't like in Wrath of the Righteous, or even in other games, is when they make the enemy variety very limited, right? So, for instance, Wrath of the Righteous, you are playing almost exclusively against demons. It gets tiring after a while, in my opinion. I've always liked, in basically any video game, I love fighting humanoid type enemies. I like fighting humans, I like fighting dwarves, I like fighting elves, orcs, trolls, ogres, gnomes, you know, that kind of stuff. When you start tossing giant insects, three-headed monsters, you know, a bunch of demons without any kind of shape, I don't enjoy that much. And especially some games like to focus too much on a single type of enemy. In this one though, you have a lot of variety. You fight against human bandits, you fight against kobolds, you fight against mites, you fight against shambling mounds, you fight against demons, you fight against spirits, ghosts, witches, men made of worms. You fight against fae, you fight against so many different types of enemies that I think is a very positive experience, because every area is going to feel unique. And they're also very well done. If you walk into a dungeon that's built to be, for example, a more animalistic dungeon filled with kobolds and trolls, for instance, it will feel like that kind of dungeon. If you walk into one that's populated by undead, for instance, it's going to feel like an undead type of dungeon. Not only is it very cool in terms of level design and enemy design, it's also interesting because you can actually prepare ahead for those types of areas. So if you are fighting, for instance, an area filled with undead enemies, you might protect yourself against stuff that deals negative damage or negative energy damage, or will drain levels, stuff like that. Stuff that's kind of unique to undead. If you see an area that feels like it, you can prepare for it. And I think that's very good. At the same time, I also think that some enemy types are not very interesting. And I guess this falls into a section here that I had, and forgive my language, which I called bullshit mechanics. So I'm calling it bullshit mechanics because there are certain things that the game throws at you that you can't actually protect yourself against too well. Or maybe you can, but you can only do it at a later point in the game. For example, Shield of Law is one of the best spells you can get in a cleric, because this... Let me actually open my thingy here. Because this will give you a bunch of buffs, right? But more importantly, it protects from all mind-affecting spells and effects. Up to this point in the game, the only thing you can actually do to protect yourself against mind effects is try to up your saving throws. Try to resist them, okay? That's the only thing you can do. You cannot make yourself immune to it. And why is this annoying? Because we're talking about a game which, again, we're talking about rolling dice. And even though at times you can stack up your attack bonus to insane amounts, or you can stack your armor class to very high amounts, as we can see here with a bunch of bonuses, saving throws, it's not as easy. So, for example, we have Knock Knock here, level 20, we're at maximum level, right? And even at max level, the will score of this character is only a 14. Maybe these values mean nothing to you, but just know that 14 is not a high amount. Which means, if we find an enemy that casts a confusion spell, for instance, I probably will not be able to resist it. Okay? And until I have Shield of Law, I'm kind of at the mercy of saving against the spell by rolling the dice, so it's basically RNG, with bonuses applied, of course, but it's still a bit of RNG. Or trying to maneuver the fight in different ways, like baiting. You can have summons go in, make them waste the spells, and then you go in, stuff like that. But for the most part, I don't really like the way it's done, because you cannot protect against certain things that might very, very easily end a run for you. Obviously, this is more important for Last Azlanti, where you only have a single save, and if you die, the game is over. But it's still annoying having to load the game because you failed a random save from a random enemy you didn't know was there. That's not even the main problem, though. Certain things, like there's an enemy in the game called the Anku, they cast Prismatic Spray. And Prismatic Spray, I've grown to hate this spell. And we're talking about bullshit mechanics, so I'm going to mention it. Let me see if I actually have it here so I can show what I'm actually talking about. I might not have it as a scroll. Or at least I might not remember the way it looks. Colliding. Okay. While I look for it, I'm gonna start describing what I mean. So it's a spell that's basically a cone, like for example this kind of effect here. It's a cone area, and everybody hit by that cone is going to receive one of several effects. And those effects might be... oh, it's almost this one. And those effects might be taking fire damage or taking lightning damage. You know, basic stuff like that, just taking damage, which is not a problem. But it can also do something like permanently curse you. It can permanently polymorph you into a beast. It can straight up kill you. And that's my main issue with that spell. And sorry for having the screen flickering here, but I'm trying to look for it because it's easier to show. I might just not have it though, sadly. In any case, a spell that can just randomly one-shot you, I don't think is a very interesting mechanic. Okay, I don't find it interesting at all. I think it's more annoying than anything else because, and again, especially if you are playing Last Azlanti, and this has happened to me before, right? I was playing a run on my own. I was level, I don't know what level I was, but I was a fairly high level on that Last Azlanti run. I was happy, things were going fine, and then I reached a specific area, and I didn't remember that particular enemy was going to be there. So I didn't protect myself against it. And the enemy showed up, it cast a spell, my main character got hit, he died, and the run was over. So essentially, you can think about a run that had, I don't know, man, let's imagine 40 hours of playtime, being very careful, leveling up my characters and all that stuff, trying to play as well as I could, and it just ends in an instant. Literally an instant. Because I got hit by the spell and died. That's it. I don't find that fun, personally. And even if you want to prepare against it, as far as I am aware, and anybody that has more knowledge on this might actually try and help me out here. Okay, I don't have it. As far as I'm aware, there is no way to make yourself immune to that effect. Okay, so again, if you're thinking about, for example, Baldur's Gate, you have spell immunity to a spell school, so you can actually make yourself immune to something. Here, you can't. And that spell, as far as I know, you cannot guarantee that you will save against it. So you have to bait the spell with summons or pets or somebody you are willing to sacrifice before you show your main character. Okay? And the same thing can also be said, for example, against Finger of Death spells, because certain enemies in the game cast Finger of Death. It's a very powerful necromancy spell, deals a lot of damage. And some enemies love to focus your main character, just to annoy you. They may have 3 people in front of them, but they will still target your main character. And if you get targeted by a Finger of Death, and you fail the save, more likely than not you are dead. And I don't really enjoy those kinds of mechanics in the game. For the most part, everything in the game you can prepare for. You can think ahead and prepare for them by getting potions for them, scrolls, memorizing spells, items, all that kind of stuff. And that's actually part of the fun, in my opinion. Naturally, after you've played the game a couple of times. Because you have to have some knowledge before you go in. But when you have something that's just random and you cannot prepare yourself properly against, I'm not very much in favor of those mechanics. Other than that, what can I say about this game? I can mention another thing here that I think is important, and I'm going to be talking about missing features and buffing. So I'll start with buffing. Buffing is a very important part of this game. Sometimes I even call this game Pathfinder Buffmaker, or Pathfinder Kingmaker, whatever you want to call it. So this is, let's keep in mind, this is literally end game. There is nothing beyond this point except the boss fight. And you can see my buffs here. This is not a low amount of buffs, okay? These are a lot of buffs. These are a lot of buffs. Buffing is crucial because buffing is what's responsible for increasing your attack values, for example, to a value that will actually hit the enemies. So we can see here, for example, we have a plus 51 on our attack because we have transformation spell applied. We have a lot of strength bonus. We have size bonuses, sacred bonuses, morale, other bonuses as well. A lot of stuff goes into this. The same thing if talking about armor class. Look, the list for buffs is very large. If you try to play the game, especially on higher difficulties, and you are not buffing, you are not playing the game right. This is something that I hate saying about games, because typically what I say is there's no right or wrong way to play the game, you just play the way you like it. But if you aren't buffing, you are likely not going to be able to pass through enemies. You're going to die over and over, it's going to be frustrating. You're going to question yourself why this is done this way, the game is stupid. But yeah, buffs are basically a necessity. You need to buff in this game. And if you look at the spell book, for example, of my cleric here, these are all memorized spells on the left here. And it's split between level 0 up to level 9. So we're talking about a lot of different spells. Okay? And not only on her, but the same thing applies to my bard, to my magus, to my sorcerer, to my alchemist. We have a lot of spells. And if you want to actually buff your characters with these spells, you have to cast them. So you have to go here and say, I want to buff my leopard with echolocation. So I have to click the button, and I have to click on the leopard. Okay, so the buff is cast. If I want to haste, I have to press haste and then click somebody. You get the idea, okay? Pretty straightforward. Now, why is this a problem? When you are playing a game such as this, where you have a lot of combat encounters, and you typically have to rest after a couple of them, be it because you got injured, or because you want to replenish your bombs or spells or something like that. If you rest, all of your buffs go away. Well, most of them. Some of them last very long, like hours. They might not go away, but for the most part, your buffs are gonna last minutes. Okay, so for instance, this one here lasts for 17 minutes at this point in the game. So early on, this will last like 2 minutes. So it will be over quickly. Which means you have to rest to get your spells back, and then you have to rebuff all over again. At this point, I've played these games so much that I don't have the patience to buff every single time. So it is a blessing, for me at least, that for these games there are also mods. So I use a couple of mods, in this case only one here, Pathfinder Auto Buff, where I can basically set up the buffs that I want to cast, and I can even split it into different options here. So, for example, long duration buffs, I have a list, and I can say, I want to cast False Life Greater on myself, and the caster is this guy, or I want to apply Foresight on these 4 guys, and the caster is this guy. And what I do is I press a button, and the mod will automatically buff everybody. It is a huge time saver, honestly, because buffing for every single fight or every couple of fights gets tiring after a while. You lose a lot of time just buffing. Not only that, you will find yourself in a fight and you'll realize you forgot to buff with haste, or you forgot to buff with stone skins. So even with the mod, I don't have a couple of buffs automated, and it's actually a good example. So Stone Skin Communal, I forgot to buff. I did not actually buff myself with that spell. And this is me using a mod. So if you're buffing every single thing by hand, more likely than not you're gonna forget something. So I wish the game had something, you know, built in to kind of automate it a little bit. If not, well, since it doesn't, I strongly recommend playing with some mods to help you out with this. In a first playthrough, I would say you can play without mods, but for a second or third playthrough, get them. It will save you a lot of time and headache. And then I also talked about missing features. So this is something that you notice a little bit more after you've played, for instance, Wrath of the Righteous, because it's from the same company, right? It's a sequel. And Wrath of the Righteous has a lot of additional quality of life that this game doesn't have. An example that I can show here, something that annoys me to no end, is you have a lot of very powerful spells that are AoE spells. They will be placed on the ground and will apply some kind of effect. For example, you have Grease. This is a very low level spell, it's level 1 spell. You basically create a pit here, not a pit, a surface of grease, and if somebody walks over it, they will have to save against it, otherwise they get knocked prone. Now, all well and good, makes sense, good spell, very powerful spell, especially early on. It's a disable, and disabling spells are basically king in these kinds of games. Very useful, I would always take it early. Now, what's the problem with this spell? The problem with this spell, and many others, is that it says all creatures. It's not party friendly. So this means it will affect both enemies, but also your allies. Okay, sure, that's fine. If I cast a fireball, I would also expect that if I'm hitting my friends with a fireball, they will also take fire damage. That's okay, I accept that. What gets very tiring though, is when we're talking about an effect that hurts your allies as well, and it lingers for a very long time. So right now I am level 20. This would last for 20 minutes. At this stage in the game, if I send somebody on top of it, we have good saves, it's a very low level spell, so I'm pretty much guaranteed to walk over it and actually save against it, so we don't fall down. But early in the game, our saving throws are quite low. So, if I cast a grease spell, I cast it I cast it in such a way that it will be as difficult as possible for people to save against. So, it's good for my enemies, it's bad for myself. And what you end up doing at times is, if you want to maximize the effect of a spell such as Grease or Web or Stinking Cloud, anything like that, is you want to target choke points. Because you expect your enemies to come in, you know, they will all stream in through this doorway. So if you put a Grease spell over here, or any kind of surface area... give me a second, please. Sorry, I am back. Baby Cordampini required assistance. So I was saying, when you have these kinds of surfaces that are basically blocking the way for you to go through a passageway or something like that, it gets very tiring because you don't have a choice. You either have to try and go through and pray that you will actually save against those effects, and trust me, early on, if you are building your characters to increase the difficulty of resisting these spells, some companions will not be able to go through them unless they roll a 20. So at times, your only hope or your only option is literally waiting until the effect ends. That is insanely annoying, in my opinion. It's one of the reasons why I don't use as much of these spells as I would otherwise do. It's because of that reason. And for instance, in Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous, you actually have like a cantrip, so a level 0 spell that you can always cast, which clears effect that you cast. So if you cast a Grease over here, you did the fight, you killed the enemies, and you just want to move through, you can actually clear the effect and keep going. That's insanely better than the current implementation. Also, in Wrath of the Righteous, you also have meta magic. So you basically have meta magic for your spellcasters. For example, heightened spell. You have heightened spell, you have empower, you have maximize, you have quicken, you have extend. One thing you don't have in this game, but you have in Wrath of the Righteous, is selective. So selective meta magic will make it so that the spell you want to cast will cost you a spell slot above. So for example, if I want to cast a selective fireball, it would not be a level 3 fireball, it would actually cost me a level 4 spell slot, but it would always be party friendly. And that just opens up an entire new world of gameplay when talking about spellcasters. Quick example, Sirocco. Very, very powerful spell. Insanely powerful spell. It's one of the best spells you can get in the entire game. I pretty much never use it. because it's not party friendly. And if it's not party friendly, I can't clear it out, I can't make myself immune to it, I'm not going to use it because I don't want to go through and also get hit by it. And this is true to a lot of stuff in this game. There's a lot of spells that I do not play with precisely because of that. And having Metamagic selective helps out a lot. So when I mention missing features is I really think there's a lot of quality of life that could be added to this game. At this point in time, it won't happen. But it's kind of a shame that those things are not done. Another thing you might notice is that in this game, you aren't able to change the camera direction. So you see the game world, you see the levels as they are presented in this angle, and you cannot change the angle. In Wrath of the Righteous, you can. That's very good, because at times you might be fighting someone that's like behind the door, and you can't see them. But if I could rotate the camera, I will be able to see them. So the game doesn't have that. Thankfully, for some of these things, there are solutions by modding. I think there's a mod that adds selective metamagic to the game, which would do a lot in terms of improving the experience. I chose not to play with it because I wanted to keep the overall Pathfinder Kingmaker experience as close to the original as possible. But you can add that to the game. There's also another mod, I think it's called Call of the Wild, if I'm not mistaken, which also adds a lot of classes, a lot of subclasses, so even more customization for your characters. And other mods as well, for example, I have it here, though I don't use it. How do I go back? Sorry, I am confused. Wait. Here. Bag of Tricks. You also have an option around here. I can't remember where. Miscellaneous, maybe? Map and travel? No, well, I can't remember what it is, but there's an option somewhere around here that also allows you to rotate the camera. So through mods, you can take care of a lot of the limitations that the game has. But of course, I know that a lot of people don't like modding, or they might think it is too complicated or something like that. They might not want to do it. That's why, for the review, I'm mentioning these things as, you know, points of improvement if possible, because currently the game does not support them by itself. Okay, so, finally, who would I recommend this game to? I think this is an important thing to consider. I mentioned previously that if I think about cRPGs, Pathfinder Kingmaker and Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous are games that very easily and very quickly come to mind for the kind of discussion. I do consider them one of the top cRPGs you can play currently. Although, throughout things that I've mentioned, the difficulty of the game, especially if you want to go for the higher ones, the intricacies and the complexity of character creation, you know, building your character, multi-classing, knowing what to pick, knowing which bonuses stack, which don't, prerequisites for feats, how you use your feats, how the spells work. There's just so much that I know for a fact that a lot of people find this to just be way too complex, way too overwhelming, and they just cannot enjoy the game. Okay? So I would say that I would recommend Pathfinder Kingmaker to anybody that likes cRPGs, but they also enjoy complex systems and complex character creation. Because I have not found a cRPG out of every single one that I've played yet that is as complex as this one. It's both a massive positive, because I do like these complex systems, but it's also a very heavy negative for people who aren't accustomed to it. It will be very difficult to understand. It takes time to get used to it. A lot of the stuff might not be very clear to you how it works at the start. It might not be in the description exactly the way you were expected, or an enemy might be immune to something and you don't even understand why. There's a lot of stuff that's complicated and requires some trial and error and just, you know, experience with the game. That's what it does. So if you like complex systems and you don't mind sometimes bashing your head against the wall to understand how it works, then I think this game is an excellent game. You have a lot of playtime with Pathfinder Kingmaker and Wrath of the Righteous. Although I'll talk about that one when I get there. But yeah, there's a lot to do in Pathfinder Kingmaker. It's an excellent game. A lot of customization, a lot of replayability, insane customization available for your character and for your companions. A lot of party options, synergies, tremendous amount of feats, spells, buffs, debuffs, offensive spells. There's just so much that it's excellent. There's just so much you can do. It's an amazingly intricate game, very well done, very fun. If you don't enjoy overly complex systems though, it might not be for you. I would much more easily recommend, for example, Pillars of Eternity to someone wanting to get into cRPGs than I would Pathfinder. Pathfinder would actually probably be the last one I would recommend. So again, I will touch this topic because it's come up a couple of times in the recent past. With the success of Baldur's Gate 3, a lot of people are trying to experiment with these older cRPGs. And they will come and ask, oh, what game should I play next? Should I play Pathfinder? I heard about Pathfinder. Should I go for this one? I love Baldur's Gate 3, so I should like this one, right? I wouldn't go for that yet. Okay? I would recommend other games before I recommend Pathfinder, especially because of the complexity. If you've never played a cRPG, this might be a bit too much for you to start with. With that said, to finalize the video, actually it's not going to be as long as I was fearing the video would be, but it's still long. My final section is about discussing Last Azlanti and also doing somewhat of a run report. I might also do a separate video just talking about the run report if I find there's a lot to talk about, but we'll see. So first of all, discussing Last Azlanti here. So just to show here, in difficulty, if we go to... where is it? Last Azlanti mode here. What it says right here on the left, only one save slot is available in this mode. The game saves automatically in key points and upon game exit. What this also means is, if you die at any point in the game, if your main character dies or if your party dies, the game is over, your save game is deleted, you have to start over. Okay, so it's basically the ultimate challenge, all things considered, in my opinion, for Pathfinder Kingmaker. It's also how I did my playthrough for the channel. It was a success, so I'm very happy about it. But just mentioning that Last Azlanti really is an optional challenge you can do, as is true with most Iron Man challenges for any other game. I think it's a cool thing to go for if you enjoy that kind of challenge and you don't particularly mind at times losing a run after spending a bunch of hours in it. It can be frustrating, but it's also very, very fulfilling once you actually complete it. It's a very good feeling, I think. And the problem with Last Azlanti, in my opinion, is that once you start playing on Last Azlanti, I can no longer play in regular mode, because it just does not feel challenging for me anymore. I'm like, oh, but I can just go in blindly, because if I die I can just quick load and who cares. And if I'm at that point and state of mind, then the game is no longer fun. I will still say though that Last Azlanti, I would never recommend Last Azlanti to anybody that's not very, very experienced in the game. I think you need a couple of playthroughs before you can actually attempt Last Azlanti. You have to know pretty much the entire game from memory. You have to look up the wiki for certain areas in case you want to check out what's happening, what kind of enemies there are, stuff like that, so you can prepare accordingly. There are certain areas which are ambushes, and you might not be expecting them, and it can all just end in a blink of an eye if you're not prepared. So, Las Azlanti, be careful about that. But since we're also talking about the run report, the run was done in Las Azlanti, and also on unfair difficulty, so basically on the highest challenge possible. I actually remember something. So, going back to bullshit mechanics, sorry, just to add to this. Another thing that kind of upsets me in this game is that there are certain areas where the game will force you to only play with your main character, okay? And what this means is, it will make several main character builds no longer viable for a playthrough, especially on higher difficulties, and even more especially on Las Azlanti. Because in my case, I built my character knowing what was coming. My character can defend himself very well. It has a lot of utility. It can blink, it can go invisible, it has mirror images, it can cast a bunch of other spells from scrolls to protect himself. And not only that, it can move quickly, and it can also deal tremendous amounts of damage in very short bursts. Either single target or multi-target, AoE. So, when I went for those areas where I have to play by myself, I can actually fight and defeat the odds and come out on top. However, if you are someone who wants to play with, for example, a more support character, which is nothing wrong with it, you might want to play as a cleric. So, in my case, I have Cordampina as my cleric, as my support caster. It could have very well, very easily have been my main character, right? And I would just take Octavia here, for example. However, if you play a more support role character, you get to those areas in the game and you are basically dead. You can't really do much against those things. And I've always felt that that's not very well designed, right? Because it shouldn't be that way. It's a party game, you can play with 6 people. I may want to make a character that's specialized only in buffing and healing, for instance, and I rely on my other characters to actually deal damage, and in those situations the game takes that kind of control away from me. And I hate that, and I just wanted to mention that as bullshit mechanics. Going back then to the run report and Las Azlanti. So, as I mentioned, the playthrough in its entirety is in the channel. I am making this review and thoughts video based on my final save from that playthrough. So we were successful. We beat everything in the game. All mandatory things were done. All optional things were also done. We cleared out the entire map of every single area with challenges in them. Different enemies, monsters, stuff like that. All done. We cleared out all quests. Main quests, companion quests, side quests, optional quests. Everything was done. We beat the true ending boss, even though we didn't get the secret ending, because it's way too complicated in my opinion. I couldn't bother with that. But we defeated all of the bosses in the game. I tried my best to also kind of show what you can do with kingdom management in your barony. Ranking up your advisors, building up your villages and towns and cities, showing off the importance of teleportation circles, the artisans particularly, showing off the items they can get, how powerful it can be to have the artisans giving you items, and the importance on getting them as early as possible, both for powerful items as well as for getting money from selling items you don't need. So I tried to show as much of the game as possible, while including as much challenge as possible, because I also did the Tenebrous Depths, which is a DLC that's like just a dungeon crawler with a lot of dangerous enemies, and especially a very, very difficult end boss. We cleared everything. I'm very proud of it. It's always a risk when I start a playthrough like this that, you know, eventually I might die. And something that I fear is, because if I die on episode 10, it's not that big of a deal. I can just start over and I will say to people, okay, I'm gonna start over. I'm going to ignore all dialogue and just kind of speedrun back to where I was and then continue. That's fine, that's doable. But I'm always nervous that I'm like at episode 60 or 70 or God forbid episode 100 and something, because these games are not short. And you make a mistake and you die and then the entire run is over and the playthrough ends in a failure. And I can pretty much guarantee you that if my run ended at episode 80, I would not start it over. I would move on to a different game. So it adds challenge for me. It also adds fun. I'm constantly at the edge of my seat, especially on certain difficult fights. I'm nervous. And maybe you can even feel it in my voice and the way that I speak when I'm in those areas. Because I truly am nervous. I don't want to die. But yeah, I'm happy we got it done. I was happy to show off as much as I could from the game. I tried to be as clear as possible on what I was doing with all of my characters, be it gameplay-wise, how I approach the fights, how I do the fights, how I build my characters. I pretty much showed every single level up throughout the entire playthrough. I explain why I'm taking levels here and there. I explain all of my feat selections, my multi-classes. I explain my party composition. I think I went through those things rather thoroughly, because I think it's important, especially in a game as complex as this one, to be clear on why I'm doing what I'm doing and how I'm doing it. So hopefully I think I was clear enough during the course of the playthrough, but as I always say, if there are any kind of questions regarding builds or fights or something like that, feel free to ask. I always enjoy discussing these games with you guys. So yeah, I think times where the run nearly ended were times where I was careless or I didn't want to cheese the game. Because there's a lot of things you can simplify by cheesing the game, which I tried as much as possible not to do. So one of those, the nearest death experience was in one of those situations where you have to play with only your main character, and you're basically ambushed by 2 leopards and a spellcaster guy. And I went down to, I think, what, like 5 HP? Before disabling them all. That was a very scary encounter. The final boss of the Tenebrous Depths also hit me quite hard. Harder than I was expecting. I wasn't actually in danger of dying, but I came close. But I feel that other than that, there really wasn't, that I can remember currently. I don't think there was any real danger of us dying throughout the entire playthrough. But again, I'm doing this not as my first or second run, right? I've played the game a bunch of times. I know from memory a lot of things. I already know where certain very dangerous things are going to happen. I am already accustomed to certain enemies and what they do. So it's not a blind run. This comes with a lot of practice. And, well, I'm just glad I was able to show it off and complete the run successfully. And I honestly hope you guys enjoyed it. With this said, my friends, I am going to make a separate video explaining my characters, because even though I went through them throughout the entire playthrough, I know that a lot of people have requested on other playthroughs as well, kind of like a summary of how my characters are built, the level ups, what kind of items I'm using, how they interact with each other. So to not make this video overly long, which it would be, I'm gonna leave that discussion of my characters in a separate video where I can go over them in more detail and explain what's happening. So, this is my review and thoughts about Pathfinder Kingmaker with a little bit of a run report. I hope you guys enjoyed it. As I always say, if you guys have any questions or suggestions, if you want to discuss anything Pathfinder related, leave a comment below. I would love to interact with you guys and talk about it. If you are only checking out this video, as I've mentioned before, there's an entire playthrough of the game on Last Azlanti and Unfair already available in the channel. So if you want to check out how I do a certain thing, a certain area, a certain fight, or how I level up a certain character during any point in the game, you can always check the playthrough and, you know, see how I do things. And again, if any questions, just ask. If you enjoyed the content, consider subscribing. Many more videos coming out soon. And it's also a free and easy way to support the channel. I think it's also worth mentioning. My next playthrough for the channel, if things go right, will be Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous. Currently, we should also have Rogue Trader finished, because I did finish Rogue Trader before finishing this one. And I think that's it. So yeah. As always, my friends, I hope you guys enjoyed it. Questions, suggestions, leave a comment. If you like the content, consider subscribing for more. And I hope to see you all in some other video, my friends. Until then, stay safe, everyone.